Finally, I've been speaking to the council leaders and their deputies on how they can support me with ambitions for the area of leading portfolios. I'm also keen to take forward reviews of our skills and business advisory boards, which members of those two boards are expecting, and a report will be brought forward on this future meeting. Turning back to the agenda. Item 4, public questions. We have received a question from a member of public.
Thank you, Mayor. We have received one public question from Mr. Morris, and his question is, has the board actively considered the voices of young people as key stakeholders in its decision-making processes? And would it be open to establishing a young people's advisory board to ensure local young people have a structured opportunity to influence and shape the board's work moving forward?
Yeah, so firstly, investing in young people is a huge priority of mine, and letting everybody have a voice is also a huge passion. My idea of investing into the younger generation is for me and our team to go around doing talks in secondary schools and highlighting what's possible in this region, what opportunities are coming up, what skills they would need, and what high value jobs they can potentially go for. That's a huge passion of mine to go around and speak to the young generation, inspire them that they can achieve anything they want, they just apply themselves and work hard. Also on that, investing into the young generation as well is what can we do with apprenticeships? How can we streamline apprenticeships where we can achieve more than 50% of them apprenticeships are finished and accomplished? Because at the moment, the success rate on apprenticeships aren't that good. So we need to look at different things and how we can engage more with the younger generation. And all that. And on top of that, it's also lobbying at government to try and fight for skills from 16 onwards, really, and not 19 as well. So that I want to be involved in the communities. I want to help the families that are struggling with fuel poverty, whether that be supplying food banks for local families, whether that be helping families that are struggling with school uniforms, stuff like that. So it's a massive priority of mine to give back and help to the young generation. Setting up a board sounds like a good idea, but it's not on my agenda right now. I want to get other things in place first. So I hope I answered this question for what he wanted out the answer. Thank you. We move to item 5. So the mayor and other combined authority members are appointed the co-optees and the subtitle members. I will ask Ian Anderson from Fern and the members.
Yeah, so obviously the appointments to the combined authority and the executive role are made here, and they obviously yourself there, and from each council, the leader and deputy council, obviously Councillor Mike Ross, Councillor Jeff Gadd, and so far as East Riding of Yorkshire Council, it's Councillor Anne Handley, Councillor Dave Tucker, and for the Police and Crime Commissioner, it's Jonathan Everson, and the two advisory boards on the skills board, we have Jane Adamson on the business board, Jason Speedy. There are also deputies for those roles, and those deputies are for Hull City Council. For the leader, it's Mark Hieronymo, the deputy leader, Linda Tock, and for East Riding Yorkshire, for the leader, it's Nick Coltish, and for the deputy leader, it's Jonathan Owen, and for the Police and Crime Commissioner present today, it's Leo Hammond, and the Skills Board, David Gent, and for the Business Board, David Hall. So that comprises your executive decision-making for making decisions on behalf of the combined authority together.
Thank you, Ian. Moving on to item 6, announcements from the head of paid services. I will now ask Mark, our interim chief exec, if he has any announcements.
No, listen, I think it's maybe a comprehensive set of announcements at the beginning of the meeting, so nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Item 7, appointment of committees. I will hand back over to Ian Anderson to present this report.
So the appointment of committees reports, you find it in the pack. I think it's slightly overwritten, but it's at page 23, I believe, of the pack. And that paper has within it the recommendations that sit there. And so, but formally, the council, the combined authority has to have in place, in addition to the executive, an audit committee and a scrutiny committee. And if you look at the appendix to that report, appendix 1, you'll see the proportionality calculation associated with each of those committees and the numbers of members who are to be represented on the audit committee and the combined and the scrutiny committee. And each council has been asked to nominate, therefore, the members to those committees in accordance with those numbers. And if you look at paragraph 4.2 of the report, you'll see the nominations that have been received from the 2 local authorities. And that paragraph gives the names nominated for appointment to those 2 committees. So the ask, therefore, is obviously 2.1, first of all, that we confirm what we've already just recognised, that the combined authority comprises those members that we've rehearsed just now. But then, secondly, that the committees that are appointed and the composition of those committees are set out in the appendix, and then the nominations that have been put forward by each authority are accepted. And they are accepted as the appointees onto those 2 committees, so that going forward, those will operate as committees of this authority. So that will give us the structure from this annual general meeting to manage the business in accordance with the Constitution.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have any questions? No.
With recommendations.
The board consent to approve recommendations. Thank you for the report. Item 8. The authorities operating model and resourcing. I will hand over to Mark to present the report.
Mr. Mayor, before Mark starts the report, I'm just going to step down to step out because I mentioned that it's the motion.
Actually.
Well, okay, thank you. So you'll have seen the report in front of you, so I'm just going to do some of the headlines and then just be really clear about what's in the recommendations and why, if that's okay. So I shall be relatively brisk. There is a lot in this report, actually, but that's because this organisation is developing quickly and fundamentally it needs to develop both to have some capability to deliver, yes, on the original deal, but also, as you've heard from now, on the kind of expanding ambition that he sure you as the board have for making sure we deliver some results for this region. So no apologies in the sense that there's a lot in here. Key element of moving forward around the organisation is actually to design it against a set of principles. And you'll see those in appendix 1. Very happy to answer any questions about them, but I hope that when you look at them or have looked at them, what you see is an involvement under the spirit of the creation of this combined authority already, which is going on for some time. So it's an attempt just to capture that and make sure that as we design the organisation, we are actually falling back on a set of guidelines, if you like, or a framework that you have already kind of really populated yourselves over the last nearly 2 years now. So you will be asked to note those principles in a moment. We've also set out what we're calling the functional model. So just need to be really clear, it's not a starting model, it's the things that the authority will need to be able to do, the responsibilities that will be required to discharge. It may feel like when I read these reports, sometimes I feel like they're in for officers rather than people. Seeing council wish to nod the head. But there is something in this about making sure that we are really clear nonetheless in advising the mayor and you about the full range of functions that this organisation will need to perform in the future. So kind of no apology that there's both a set of design principles and a clear functional chart that sets out kind of the way that you need to move forwards. Probably more practically at Appendix 4, there is an interim staff instruction. You can see a who's who of who is currently in the organisation. The most significant point about all of that is that you could probably put interim in front of everything. And the position we need to start to move away from as quickly as possible, which I'll come back to in a moment, is this organisation is getting up on its feet, but is getting up on its feet with people such as myself, actually, who are in interim roles and seeking to drive the design of the organisation quite quickly, so we get to some permanency in relatively short time. You can also see just from the appendix where we are starting to have capacity. As I said, most of it's interim, but I also want, I think I said this at the last board meeting, it is really important for me to recognise as the head of paid service that we are drawing still upon significant time and commitment from the two councils, staff teams as well. So whilst you might not see that represented in here, because these are Haker staff, I absolutely want to be clear that gratitude remains strong, and we are indeed reliant upon being able to work with officers across both councils and of course more widely in the partnership. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's important to put that continue to put that on the record. One of the things that we need to do to be able to employ directly in due course combined authority staff is put in place a pay and grading framework. I know that most of you, perhaps all of you, will know that from your own professions anyway. But it's particularly important that we do that. It will ensure that there's equity in terms of job role and the remuneration for those job roles. But it is an important piece of work that hasn't yet been done, and this paper is going to seek permission to proceed with that and use some delegations, I think, to the Section 73 officer and myself in order to move forwards with that. But we do need a pay and grading structure, just as I know you will have that into local authorities, and I'm pretty sure you'll have that obviously in the District High Commissioner's office, as well as in those other organisations represented around the table. So you can see the kind of building blocks that the bill put in place. And any of you are permitted to use any of the metaphors that basically go building aeroplanes in flight, because I think that's actually what we are doing now. Jane de Grua has stepped out, and up to this point in the meeting, Ian has been acting in the role of interim monitoring officer, and is here today because Lisa Dixon, who you will have seen in previous meetings, is unavailable. We will be asking you to move the designation of interim monitoring officer from Lisa through Ian today to Jane, so that the combined authority itself has its own, I guess, kind of independent legal and other government advice. I want to be really clear, especially on the basis of the comments I've just made about how grateful we are for the support we've been getting, but in particular in this regard to Hull City Council, we have absolutely depended upon their resource in this space to help us make sure that we are safe and sound as an organisation. And I'm grateful to Lisa, grateful to Ian today, and to others in the legal team, including colleagues right at the end of the table taking notes, Louise, for that support that we received. But we will be able to stand on our own 2 feet in an interim capacity again, if you make that decision shortly, when we go to the recommendations. We're also seeking approval. There are several statutory posts, as I'm sure you all know, that the organisation requires. So we'll also be asking permission to proceed with, again, one of the clunkiest titles, but the Senior Information Risk Gain and Data Protection Officer. Sure you can say that, I think that's sweet. But we need to proceed with that role because again, it's another statutory function that we have to perform. And then Julian may want to comment, but we are also signalling that we will need to make in due course some adjustments to the establishment budget, the staff and budget of the organisation. There is sufficiency of resource at the moment for the next phase, but the time will come as the organisation builds that absolutely the budget that you agreed in March, wasn't it?
Yeah, pre-Matt. We will be bringing in due course of a report that updates on establishment and associated costs. And then finally, I've remembered everything to cover in this report. Again, seeking support to move forwards with the formation of the appointments panel so that we can formally proceed to starting the recruitment of the permanent chief exec. And I think it's a really important kind of cascade that flows from that. Once the mayor and the board, through the appointments panel, are able to make a permanent appointment of chief exec, and lots of other permanent people quite quickly come into play. And we've worked to, I think, a kind of common principle that start with chief exec, because whilst again, the next level of appointments will still be what's termed chief officer appointments and require the appointment panel to make them. Having the permanent chief exec in play, even if he or she hasn't even started, but nonetheless having them in play in that process is absolutely critical. So we will be seeking your permission to begin to move forward on the recruitment. I said I'd be brief. I will say this, I'm going to be brief and not. I'm going to pause at that point. You've got a set of recommendations in front of you. I think for the purposes of today, Mr. Mayor, it would be useful to take each recommendation separately, because you may have questions on them. You may not want to agree to all of them in event. But if we could move the questions first, and then perhaps I could come back to each of the recommendations and just check that you and the board are happy to proceed with them.
I just have one question. I'm happy with the recommendations apart from 2.7. And the reason I say that is because as a brand new organisation, I do believe that we need to be transparent. And I would like to bring back to this board to discuss who the service provider will be to develop a pay and grading framework, because that will cost this combined funds of money. And I would very much like that to come back to the board and not be delegated to the chief exec, to the finance officer, and I'm just trying to think, and the monitoring officer. So I think that should be a discussion, open discussion at the board for transparency purposes there. That's just my remark.
I would second
I
that.
agree.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah. Right.
So can I make a suggestion? That could be done outside the formality of the next board meeting, which is until July, but the board needs to be nonetheless at the appropriate moment in the next week or two kind of consulted about this. And basically, I think I'm just concerned to move at speed, but not obviously at haste, because clearly we want to have some further oversight of this. So I think all I'm suggesting to you, but clearly you don't have to agree to it, is that the next board is not for another month. And I would like to work out whether we proceed quickly for the next board meeting.
Yeah.
That's all.
How
I think
quickly?
maybe being suggested by a decision record that's signed by the mayor and the two leaders, I think you suggest.
Well, actually, quickly, how quickly can you put that together for us to look at?
So the lead officer is on leave this week and back next week. I'm sure if he wants to get cracking on from next week.
I don't want to hold this up at all, but I have assumed that this would be going out to the market to find the best value. And that's what I'm thinking about. So if it's going out to the market to find the best value, I can't see why we couldn't, we're not opposing it going out to the market, because it needs to, because we need to get best value for money. And I am assuming, because there are quite a few people out there or companies out there that actually do this. So I can't see that can stop. And will they get back to us before the next meeting, or can they come back to us next week? So that's kind of.
Yeah, essentially what you're saying is the 2.7 recommendations turn to give agreement to start the process, but not
Yes,
to do the appointment.
absolutely. I don't mind starting
Yeah.
the process,
Yeah.
but I would still like it to come back to the board for us to actually discuss in an open and transparent way what we feel the recommendation is, and who the right appropriate company is that's going to do this.
But once this was brought to my attention, and I found out roughly what costs are involved in this, and I'm all for saving costs, and I'm like, well, I've got a big reach on my social media. I can reach 500,000 people just by pressing a button. So I'm all for saving costs and looking for the best alternatives, and you guys who have your input.
I think it's just to be open and transparent, because it's such a new organisation and there is a high cost associated with that. And I think rather than just go down the delegation route, I think it's just being incumbent that it comes back to the board, where the board can actually vote on this.
If I may, I think what's been asked is that the recommendation be changed or amended, rather, to say that authorise the interim chief executive consultation with the interim monitoring officer in section 73 officer to initiate the procurement of a suitable service provider, subject to bringing the final report back to board for determination, with the purpose of developing the pay and grading framework. So you're authorising the initiation of the procurement, but for any final decision comes back to the board. I think that's what you're inviting it to be amended to.
So we actually get oversight of, if
You- the-
there's
the-
6 companies that have
Yeah.
actually we have procured to, we get an oversight of that and be able to decide collectively that what we, is that what?
Yeah,
That's
so
what
you're
I'm
authorising the
saying.
initiation of procurement, but the
Yeah.
final decision comes back with a
Yeah.
report to determine.
Yeah, so initiation of the decision, yeah, I'm happy with that. If you're, sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's your, are you happy with that?
Well, no, of course, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, and I'm happy with all of the recommendations. Yeah.
I seek one further clarification from here. So I have no intention of excluding non-constituent and associate members from any discussion, but
Yeah.
the voting
Yeah.
is obviously through the 5.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring so the question I'm asking is just a timeline question. If we're able to bring something back relatively quickly, do you want to convene the whole board, or do you want to convene that part of the board which actually votes on this and decides the way forwards?
As long as it doesn't slow the process.
Well, I mean, that's key. We can't be slowed down in what way. That's gonna help. It's gonna stop this vehicle from moving.
And you have a question, Daniel?
I have a question of clarity, but I would like to be involved in a discussion because I do this for a day job. So I might have some useful points to add into the discussion that the board has when you do come to that point.
I think that's clear. We'll be.
Yeah, my expectations, it will take a month anyway. I would doubt we'll be ready within a lesser period than months. Now you've got the author, subject to having the authorization.
To like the 25th of July meeting anyway.
And I was just gonna suggest the leaders and the deputies, if I was honest, to have that decision.
They just have the decision, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm hearing certainly from one of the associate members that you would like also just to be part of the discussion ahead
Yeah.
of the 5 of you making the decision.
If it's not going to be the meeting till 25th of July anyway, then we know we should do it that meeting.
Okay.
I just asked the points of clarity that I had was just around your timing. So when you'll be appointing somebody to do the pay framework, well, prior to that, you'll be wanting to go out for your chief executive.
Yeah.
How do you then determine the pay for the chief executive?
So the way that this is done in other places I've been in is that a pay and grading essentially will be done for that role and
Yeah.
benchmarked against broadly comparable roles, principally in other public sector organisations, whether local authorities and or combined authorities. So in the East Midlands, for example, which is where I've most recently did some work, including this work, then it was also ahead of the pay and grading framework, and it was done as a kind of ipsative benchmarking piece of work then. So that's why we want to convene the appointments panel, because there needs to be agreement to the pay range.
Okay.
That will be required to go to market with.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just another point of clarity, in terms of the procurement process for the selection of who you're going to ask for quotes, how is that done? Because there's a very wide selection of different recruitment agencies out there, some local, some national, and a very broad, just from my knowledge, a very broad range of rates as well in terms of that. So how is that process going to be fixed in terms of who you will approach?
The expectation I would have is that we would probably use an established framework contract and use the methodology within that, because that would be, to get this done quickly, we would then have a mini tender process within an established framework contract.
Is this all going us up now? Well, for what we was gonna do?
I wouldn't say it's holding you up, because I think what I'm hearing, but I don't think what I'm hearing, what I am hearing is just at this early stage of the development of the board and the authorities to have full oversight and transparency of the decision making around this particular activity. So I don't think it'll hold anything up, because one of the other recommendations is to ask to form the appointments panel so that at least proceed with the chief exec role.
Yes.
I might comment if I thought that was being held up, but I don't think it isn't held up by this procurement, for example.
Yeah, I don't think we need the board. I think it's just the leaders and the deputy to have this discussion. I don't think we need the board to get improvement.
All I'm hearing is that in terms of timeline, so let's separate two things out. One recommend, let's do the chief exec one first, because it's easy. It's not easier, it's just quicker, it's more precisely defined. So there's a recommendation on the 66, yeah, simply to commence that process of recruitment. And that commences by forming the appointments panel. So essentially, there'll just be a request to have a meeting to kick things off, and that can be as soon as everybody can get together. Around the pay and grading for the wider organisation, then I'm just hearing that we'll probably be back here in a month's time to be able to consider recommendations from them intended through.
Yeah, so you're authorising, if the proposed amendment is accepted, you're authorising the process to be initiated, so that doesn't delay it at all, that gets it underway. But then the decision comes back to this board in the same way as any other decision would normally do, so it's just following the normal process, and it will take a month. We won't be able to get it completed with anything less than a month, and that month might be seen as quite taxing, but we'll have to see what we can do.
I think you're balancing how long it takes with transparency.
If I would just say, Mr. Mayor, all it is the process is going to continue as from today. We're all happy with that. All I ask for is instead of delegating interim chief exec section 15173, section 73 officer and the monitoring officer, is that we have a look at that. Follow to the circumstances, because there will be attached to that, and I just think it's important that we are open out there.
Yeah.
That's all I ask.
That's fine. So approving the process, and we'll come back to,
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just check if anybody has any more questions?
No, but the councillor Andy's moving recommendations with that amendment, I will say.
Right.
Well, thank you.
Will you just, for the sake of there being 7 different recommendations, just go through each one and just check that the board is comfortable with the 2.7? So,
So it's that 2.1.
so two, yeah, should we start with 2.1 indeed? So you were asked to note the content of the paper. Hopefully that's not controversial. Support the proposed I can't speak like that. Support the proposed operating model.
Thank you.
Note the current interim staffing arrangements.
Yeah.
You approve the appointment of James Aguirre as interim statutory monitoring officer and senior information officer pending permanent recruitment. Thank you. Approve the appointment of the statutory post of data protection officer on an interim basis again. Approve the commencement of the process, including establishment of the whole initial combined authorities employment panel. Sorry, I called it appointments panel.
This is a point panel, yes, I think.
In order to initiate the appointment of chief exec. Thank you. And then Ian, read out what the amended 2.7 is, so I get the words right.
Authorises the interim chief executive in consultation with the interim monitoring officer and section 73 officer to initiate the procurement of a suitable service provider to develop the pay and grading framework, subject to the award of the contract returning to this board for determination.
Now, is it the board or is it the leaders and the deputies?
It's the board, which is,
Right.
this is the executive framework that we have established for decision making. Obviously, as has been said, certain people have different voting responsibilities, but this is the executive framework for decision.
Can I ask Mr. Mayor a quick question? given what you just said here, with the time frame, I'm obsessed about time frames. Because we have a time frame, because you said you can pull this together in a month, and given that we don't want to start the process.
I said we'll seek to do it in that timescale. I mean, I say we in this context because I anticipate the ask will come to the city council to facilitate this. But the most easy way I could see this being facilitated through is a mini tender off an existing framework contract. We'll look at that in the next couple of days. We'll look at what the specification is that we've got, but it will be a very short order.
The reason I asked is we go into recess.
Yes, in July, yeah.
Recess. Yeah.
I understand the point, yeah.
Recess.
And understand the point.
We're your country cousins. That's the reason I was asking.
Right.
At least be done better after that.
So in terms of all the specifics of this particular recommendation, so all of this is enormously helpful. I would also like to use the words that officers often use at this point about our best endeavours. I think our best endeavours should be to bring a report in time for the next board for you to be able to consider the recommendations of the procurement. In order just to do some expectation management, both above Ian's, who's managing the timeline. I'd also like to say to you that it might be a late report. Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure we'll be able to upload a finalised report 7 days ahead of the meeting because of the timeline that we work. That's just to be clear.
But we can have a report on the agenda.
Yes, definitely on the forward plan. Yeah.
Can I just, in terms of Ian's point around who's picking up, probably if we do an approval about that process to be made, I imagine that it's delegated to.
I think it's service level arrangements are presently with the two councils, so the legal work at present is with Bolton Council, so that's already the way it operates.
No pressure.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I get Jane back in the room? Thank you. Probably worth the saying what the decision is. She sits down.
After all that. All right, so moving on.
So, Mr. Mayor, absolutely, but the board, Jane, the board has concluded your recommendation.
So congratulations.
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Item 9, yeah, to approve conceptual documents not considered under any other item. Ian?
I don't believe there are any, not that I've seen anyway, I don't think I've missed anything.
Item.
The combined authority has responsibility for making appointments to certain outside bodies, and those are listed in the appendix to this report. The need for nominations and appointments to those positions is identified in the report. So it's essentially that we holders and the outside body appointments. So this is at this stage, I believe that simply this is to consider the appointments with the intention that in due course the roles are filled in accordance with the guidance in this paper and as part of your scheme of delegation.
Now, proposed consent to approve recommendation.
I think you, Mr. Mayor, have to step out for your next item, and Councillor Sandy, I think, is kindly offered to take the chair.
Do you want me to move to the chair, or can I sit here for one item?
I think that's absolutely fine.
Louise, for the purposes of the recording, does the chair need to be sitting at the top, just to say which is?
I'm okay. So, thank you, everybody, and for one item only, and that is on recommendation number 1, which will be the mayor's salary. Is everyone happy with the mayor's salary? £72,000. That's the, not salary, please accept my apologies, it's an allowance, it's not a salary. The mayor doesn't get a salary, he gets an allowance. Is everyone happy with that recommendation? Yep, thank you very much, everyone, thank you. Can you come back, please? Can confirm, Mr. Mayor,
Oh, you
that
just confirm.
the panel is happy with the allowance that you prepared as the mayor of Bold and East Yorkshire. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Are you,
And Chair, sorry, can I just note that there are some other allowances set out in the schedule to the report, which include the chairs of, excuse me. They include allowances in respect of a deputy mayor once one is appointed. The chair of audit, the recommendation is that they should be set at £7,000. The independent member of the audit and governance committee, that allowance should be set at £250 per meeting. That the scrutiny chair's allowance be set at £10,485 annually. That other members of the scrutiny audit committee should receive an allowance of £1,000, and recommendations are also made in relation to mileage and subsistence allowances. The rationale for the recommendations is very clearly set out in the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel, where they also explain the evidence that they took and the comparisons that they used. Chair, you're back in the chair now, Mr. Mayor. Are you happy that we seek to, sorry, we request a move and second for those items?
Yeah.
Unless there are any questions.
no,
You're back.
yeah, I'm on. Thank you, well,
Please, please.
that
Needs everybody to move.
Yeah, I'm open.
Well, thank you.
That was second. I'm going to second. No, Councillor Ross second. It was that pause as a kid.
Can it be agreed? Yeah, Rob, say,
Thank you.
Can we pass on that back to the IRB?
Yes.
Item 12, combined authority meeting scheduled 25-26. I will hand over to Ian to present the report.
So this is formally as part of the annual meeting, we'll have to determine when meetings will take place and what this has in the appendix. There too is a list of proposed dates for the meetings of overview, scrutiny, audit and the combined authority itself. So you can find those meetings there just to confirm those. So they're then diaries. Likewise, it has on the second page of the business board and skills board meetings, and seeking your agreement those be put in cast in stone, if you like. But obviously, it's possible to change these dates if problems arise. But the expectation is this is the programme of meetings for the year. Obviously, in preparing them, we've looked at the consequences for other meetings within other places to try and make sure they work without the likelihood of a need for substitutes.
Do you have any further questions?
No. Yeah.
No. Oh, well, thank you for approval on that.
I'd be happy to move for the recommendations.
So there we go. That concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Tonight, 11 AM, venue to be confirmed.